So with that, let's just segue right into talking to Sean in Colorado.
Perfect.
Sean, you're live with Eric and V. What would you like to talk about today?
Well, I was actually, it was hilarious. I was listening to you guys' conversation, like, are you guys kidding me? It's just like what I'm about to say directly links into this. But yeah, so I saw you on the Genetically Modified Skeptics live stream, and I'll just start by saying I have a lot of respect for that dude because he actually looks for, information, understanding, and comprehension. And what I was going to bring up is the reality of the inherent importance of subjectivity within itself, because we exist subjectively, if that's a word. But the problem is,
I remember. Hold on, Sean. Are you the one in the comments who I asked to call in?
Yeah, was that Sorry.
Okay, cool. So, okay. I'm really happy about this. Thank you. And by the way, I love Drew too.
Yeah, Drew's awesome.
Yeah, he's like a brother. I really care about the guy. But anyway, please go on.
So what I was talking about in the live chat is kind of pretty much that we exist subjectively. You know what I mean? Like this, we're born into a subjective experience that gives us capacity to think, to analyze, to observe. And through this subjective capacity, we've gained access to stuff like science and mathematics and conversations and understanding, and most importantly, consciousness itself. But the problem is, and I think that this has been something that has been completely overlooked, is that we have used this subjective experience that we are just born into as a validation of the objectivity of the universe divorced from our subjectivity. So in simpler terms, I would say that I think that there's been a problem where people just take their consciousness as an inherent reality of seeing or analyzing the truth. And the problem is that we don't know objectivity exists because of the fact the only reason we even have the conception of objectivity is due to the subjectivity of our experience. Without our experience, objectivity wouldn't even, without our experience, the very concept of objectivity wouldn't even be able to exist for our own capacity. So my position is just simply, and then I'll let you guys, say what you want, and then we can go from there. But is that I think that we have to inherently comprehend the importance of our existence, even in the capacity to do science, because if it wasn't for the universe, the makeup of the universe, how it's constructed, we wouldn't exist. So I think it's hard to claim or say that the universe would exist without our subjective experience when our only experience of literally everything is based upon a subjective capacity.
Well, so let me challenge that this way. I'm assuming that you have known people who have died. The universe hasn't stopped existing when any of them passed. And I don't think you or I are special enough that it would end when we pass. And so while we don't have that experience, we do have the experience of this reality continuing to exist as people stop existing.
Yeah, I would 1000% agree, but still people passing in my continuization is still a subjective experience that I am taking and then realizing or abstracting as an objective reality. So if I see someone die or I know someone who's died and say, well, the universe keeps on existing. And I'm not saying that you're wrong by any capacity, but what I'm trying to do is illustrate the inherent importance of understanding where our subjectivity really comes into play, because we are using that subjective experience of someone else dying as a representation of the objectivity of our comprehension.
Right. Are you moving us into the direction of solipsism here? Because it sounds like solipsism to me. Are you brain in a vat guy, or where does this end? Where do we end up?
Okay. So I guess I would just simply say that, and this is for me, in order to truly value the complexity of science, from my perception, we also have to value the very existence of our comprehension. We have to understand it and seek that understanding, because the fact that we're consciousness, the fact that words exist to communicate thoughts and experiences, is a level of complexity that I think science has entirely missed in a lot of functional capacities due to.
Wait, you think science doesn't Wait, I'm confused because to an extent I agree, but it sounds like you're trying to convince us of our subjective experience and that the brain is doing cool shit. We agree with that. We also, I would say that we both agree that in a sense, we cannot go beyond our subjective experience. Yeah. We can do the best we can, but you're a theist, right? So how are you using this? I'm assuming that you're going to bring this around to a God somehow. It feels like if you were being intellectually honest, it would be the opposite, right? That you would say, well, because we can't prove objectivity or see outside of our subjective experience, we can't prove that a God exists in any real sense. And so I'm an agnostic. I'm an atheist, right? How are you using this?
Okay, so I would say that, and thank you for re-solidifying my point. It's kind of going off there on the rails a little bit, but my point would be faith inherently, that there is, even in science and scientists, that there is an inherent need, a requirement for faith in and of itself. Because
we might have different definitions of faith. So let's make sure we're clear on our definitions so we're not talking past each other. Okay. What do you mean when you say faith?
Can you prove that anything exists beyond your subjective experience? Can you prove that?
Hold on. I'm still trying to get the definition for faith. I was starting to be like, okay, this is the definition for faith.
Okay.
And then it kind of
a belief that a belief that requires trust. You can't foundationally. There's a point where it's a leap of faith. So there's a point, there's a gap. So faith is a belief that you know, is the way I would put it.
Could
a belief that you know.
Could we also state that as belief without evidence?
Or belief without sufficient evidence?
Well, what is evidence? I mean, I exist, consciousness exists.
Sure,
I mean, I like my faith is based upon my consciousness, my experience in life, my experience in the world. So my faith is definitely based upon evidence. So I would disagree with that.
Okay, so we're starting to flex our definitions here to include things that I don't necessarily think belong in there. So if we don't flesh that out, then we're going to talk past each other. The first is evidence is a point, a verifiable piece of a verifiable fact, something that independently people can investigate and see points towards one conclusion as you're investigating it. And so evidence, if you're saying that existence is evidence of a God, I would say that is incredibly poor evidence, because I can point at that and say existence is evidence of no God. You actually need to make an investigative. You need to make a claim that we can investigate. And so, what evidence do you have?
This was my inherent point about faith, and my point is that you exist subjectively. What evidence do you have of the objectivity of other people? You don't. It's an impossibility, right? Like you have, through your subjective experience, information that is outside of yourself that you could then engage with to say, okay, so this external evidence is something that points towards a level of consolidation, but it is still based and predicated upon your own subjectivity within itself.
So what?
Faith.
No, hold on. No, hold on. Just because subjectivity is uncomfortable doesn't mean that you get to posit something that doesn't mean faith is good. It doesn't mean faith is useful. And it doesn't mean that faith necessarily points you toward true things and away from false things. All it does is say subjectivity is uncomfortable, therefore I'm going to turn around and do this other thing. And
my point is about the inherent nature of subjectivity and stuff. For instance, okay, so we can take this 4 steps back and we can just deal with what I'm saying. You could live every day wondering, is your brain just a brain in the vat? You know what I mean? You could think that every day, and that would be a true lack of faith in the universe. So that would be a true comprehension of subjectivity.
We're not using faith the same again.
Yeah,
so.
I do want to jump in here real quick and clarify something, because I think that this is a conversation I've had so many times, and everyone seems to suggest, and it sounds like what you're suggesting ultimately is that because we have a subjective experience, everything outside of that subjective experience is equally unprovable, equally unlikely, and there requires equal amounts of faith. And that's simply not accurate. That's not how it works. So you can't say that it is equally likely that I am holding a red cup in my hand right now and that a God exists, because one, even though it's still a subjective experience, is a lot easier for other people to agree on than... See, like, okay, it's verified. It's not a 50-50 yes or no either way with everything. That's not how the universe functions.
And you can independently verify those things. Just because we can't objectively know with a capital T for capital T truth, at that point, you're defining objectivity in a way that that word becomes absolutely useless. Absolutely useless, because what is objective if it outside of our experience? I mean, let me give you a definition for objective. For me, I would say that we can talk about something that is definitionally true. We can talk about unmarried bachelors. We can talk about round circles. We can talk about, things that are true and objectively true because we are defining them that way. Right.
True,
so we can have access to
your comprehension. But your comprehension of objectivity is created through your consciousness and your experience. My point is that faith, in one capacity or another, you believe other people exist. I believe other people exist. Okay?
No. So hold on. Do you think I have no evidence for the existence of other people?
Beyond your subjectivity, no.
Who cares?
Not.
Hold on. Okay, so hold on. The response that beyond your subjectivity, what does that mean? Do you have access beyond your subjectivity, Sean?
No. That's my inherent point. My inherent point is I have to, at some point, I either lose my mind and say, I don't know if I'm real, I don't know if anybody else is real, and just live in that space for my entire existence, or at some point I have to say that I will interact with the world in a level of trust, that I believe this to be true. Do I have any evidence, objective evidence, that other people exist? No, I'll never have that. But I believe it to be true.
So you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater there. Yeah. What you do is you assign degrees of confidence to your understanding of the things around you based upon the evidence. And depending on the size of the claim, you need to have a sufficient amount of evidence to follow that. No, not at all. Otherwise, what's the difference between reaching in your pantry for a box of cereal or reaching under the sink to get a bottle of bleach, when it comes time to have breakfast?
Right. It's not an on or off switch. It's not subjective, objective. It's not unprovable, totally 100% proven. It is it's like a turn dial, right? It's like you're finding the right level. So it goes from 1 to 100, let's say, instead of on and off, yes or no.
I'm not arguing that objectivity does not exist. What I'm arguing for is that our subjectivity is what defines our comprehension of objectivity, or even more importantly, our consciousness that is just given to us. We are given consciousness. Now you can argue.
Hold on.
Well, that's a claim that is
who gave it?
Sneaky snuck in there.
Yeah, we don't agree with you on that at all. And also,
I know, I absolutely.
And also, we totally understand your claim. We're saying, here is our reason for rejecting your claim.
Right. We don't think that you don't think objectivity exists. You think that it's not attainable 100% from a subjective standpoint. I agree, but I'm approaching it less of I can't 100% objectively prove everything, therefore nothing is possible or easy to, nothing is able to be proven at all. I'm saying it's a degrees thing. I can be 5% sure that something is real. I can be 75% sure something is real. That's how I operate. That's my methodology. And I found that works really well. That's what science is about, is about getting us up higher to that degree of confidence, right? And so I guess my question for you is, why are we having this conversation? How is this proving God to us? Are you going to say that because everybody is subjectively experiencing the world, your subjective experience of the world with God in it is no better than my subjective experience of the world without God in it? Is that where we're going?
To a degree that like we have to take, the only point I'm trying to make is that we have to take our own subjectivity into account when we evaluate anything. And
we do. That's what science is for. Science is for that purpose. We understand that one person that subjectively is going to experience things in a certain way. And so the best way to determine is that thing real objectively is to get as many people as possible to replicate that thing as accurately as possible to get us to that higher degree of confidence. You're saying science doesn't do this. This is what science is. This is the purpose of it.
No, I'm saying that inherently using your subjective experience to prove the unquestionable reality of the objectivity of the universe is kind of insane.
Who's doing that? Nobody's doing that.
You just strawmanned us, dude.
Yeah, we're not doing that. You're not doing that. Who in this conversation has made that claim?
And if that's the case, then subjectivity should play a large portion in our comprehension of the universe. So for my end point, or the point that I would conclude on, would be that the subjectivity of my experience within the universe could very well be inherent to the universe itself. Because of the fact that the universe exists through my capacity and subjective capacity to experience it, there could be a very high likelihood that the subjectivity that I am experiencing within the universe, and including my consciousness, has an inherent connection and divinity within the universe itself, because of the fact the only way I can understand anything is through my subjective experience. And as such, it might mean that subjectivity has a higher functionality within the universe itself than just an observational capacity.
Okay. It looks like you got...
I honestly, I feel like we shifted gear into hyperdrive there for a second. That was a little bit of a gish gallop, Sean, just a tad.
It made this is recorded. It made sense. You can listen to it.
Yeah, and you can go back and listen as well, for sure. And we will. That is literally a thing we do.
Yeah.
I have it.
For sure.
So going back though, dude, the reasoning you gave can also be used to justify literally anything. It can literally be used to justify anybody's conception of a deity. It can be used to justify anyone's conception of conspiracy. It can be used to justify anyone's conception of really anything that comes out of their imagination. I don't know how you're using this line of thinking to get you to justifying whether or not something is true.
Right. Heaven forbid someone say, my subjective experience of the universe would subjectively and therefore actually be better without Sean in it. Therefore, I'm going to go to Sean's house, right? You wouldn't want that to happen. So how do we build a world where everyone's subjective experience can rest on a shared understanding of reality to the best of our ability, right? That's what we care about. I don't really care about the more I don't know, maybe if we got super high and we were having this conversation, I'd feel differently about it. But practically on a everyday level, this doesn't really help me with anything apart from Sean has cool ideas sometimes that still need some evidence to back them up.
Well, I can answer it. First off, I could say that absolutely you guys are 1,000% right. This argument is not to prove the decency of anything. You're 1,000% right. It could be used to argue for any position. I would use this argument in tandem with actually the philosophy of Jesus to say that the pinnacle of value within the universe is the capacity to recognize another person's subjective experience as if it was your own objective experience. Because we do experience
I think that is going to need to be something that I listen back to and unpack, because I don't think I'm going to be able to give you a sufficient response to that.
For sure.
I do think that you paid us a compliment, so I'm going to say thank you.
No, definitely. I mean, you guys were hitting the point. So, like, in this capacity, I was making the argument, not necessarily trying to, prove a grander scheme. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think that the true reality is, and the final conclusion would be to value the subjectivity of every individual, to understand that we all experience this world and this universe, and to understand that, to care for each and every one as if it was ourselves. So, yeah.
Entirely agreed. We don't need God for that. And ultimately, dude, I would love to see evidence toward the claim. Because there are people in the live chat who are just like, Tukokwe, this is Tukokwe. Well, you use faith too. It's you too. So it's
very fluffy chinchilla.
Yeah, it's your dad's being a lifelong smoker and then catching you smoking as a teenager and being like, you shouldn't do that, it's gonna kill you, and you being like, Dad, you can't tell me that, you smoke too. Well, no, that actually doesn't have anything to do with the validity of the claim that was made.
Right. I think we're running into the same conversation we had with Hadi before, which is we can say that we value every person's subjective experience, but valuing something doesn't by necessity make something equally true. I can value your subjective experience and say, Sean has his own experience of the world. He is, he deserves to be heard. He deserves a voice. We are going to listen to him. But at the same time, I don't have to then agree with you that your subjective experience is accurate.
Yeah.
That's where
I wouldn't say that, but what is more true? But what is more true than your own subjective experience? The only thing I'm saying is take that 2 steps further and understand your subjective experience is true. You know that for a fact.
The thing that is more true than my subjective experience is the subjective experience of multiple people that corroborate my subjective experience.
But your subjective experience is still the thing that you use to interpret multiple people having accurate. And trust me, I'm not a dogmatist. I think religion has failed in numerous capacities. I think it has limited the minds of so many people. I think it's been an inherent damage. I think they took the message of Jesus and just destroyed it. I mean, trust me, I am not a fan of organized religion or just a blind adherence to anything. My only position would just generally be to question and have an open perception with what you deal with, I guess.
Well, Sean, let's actually leave it on that, because I know we have a bunch of other callers, but I do want to say, as a theist, as somebody who is on the other side of this argument from us, I have actually seen outside of this that you do support atheist content creators. You actually do want to see the discourse elevated, and from our side of it, we do too. And so I'm glad that we continue to do that. And cheers, man. Thank you.
Cheers. Have a good one. Jesus.
Huh.
Ooh, went on a trip there.
We did.
Ended up in a vet.
Yeah.